How's it going? This is Professor Harvey again, and what I want to do is I want to summarize what we accomplished in week 3. I know we're sort of just into week 4 here, but I want to summarize from week 3. Hopefully, we're working on lab number 4. Lab number 4, like we said before, is a continuation of lab number 3. So one thing I want to clarify about labs 3, 4, 5, and 6 is that all 4 of those labs feed into a single report, right? So what you want to do is you want to take the report template. It's in the week 8 materials because it's the report template for the final report for the final project for the class. But for weeks 3, 4, 5, and 6, those labs, they all feed into building a single report, right? So lab 3 was about using volatility in Wireshark, analyze the data, come up with information about the attack that's depicted in the materials we have. Week 4 was about going into EnCase and looking at the disk image and adding additional data from that to our picture of the attack. 5 and 6 are about other parts of things that go into the incident report, specifically recommendations for how to deal with the immediate issues surrounding the incident and how to deal with remediating any issues that may have led to the incident in week 6. So all those things are going to go in a report. So the best thing to do when you turn it in, what I would like for y'all to do is to just continue adding these things to the same report. So in week 4, you can turn in the same report from week 3 with the new material added. Week 5, add the new material to the end of the same report. Also, as part of that, you can continue to work on the tech side, right? So basically, essentially what I'm saying is, please go ahead and do turn in, because you need to turn in, get a grade, your week lab 3, lab 4, as you go. But as you have time, and you should have time, because those assignments for week 5 and 6 are not nearly as time consuming as the technical stuff for week 3 and 4. So if you're not satisfied with what you've learned and what you found in those materials we're examining for that lab 3 and 4, continue to go into them and continue to refine your technical findings, continue to add those and refine those in the report, and continue to turn in where your report currently is each week, all the way through week 5, week 6. And when you turn it in week 6, that'll be your final version of that report. And I will go ahead and continue to adjust your grades for lab 3, lab 4, lab 5, lab 6 as you go. So as long as you turn something in that's passable those first couple weeks, that's fine. I'll continue to update your grades and allow you to continue improving and editing and adding to that lab report, because we want to make it the best we can. Essentially, then the final lab spans weeks 7 and 8, and it's essentially doing the same thing, only instead of 4 weeks to do it, you have 2 weeks to do it. And hopefully, having done it once, we'll have an even better product for that final project that's due at the end of week 8. It's kind of the final capstone project for the class. So I hope that clarifies how that lab works. And I want to do that because I want to give you the flexibility to keep working and keep improving, keep learning, because I'm going to be posting some videos giving you some additional, hopefully you've been using the principles in those initial 4 videos I posted on how to use the tools to better get information. And I'm going to post some additional videos now showing with that lab 3 and 4 evidence, some things you should be looking for and hopefully have found and kind of help you, point you in the right direction to get the right answers and get lab 3 and 4 in the bag. I didn't want to post it initially because I wanted to let you work on it for starters. So that's where we are with the labs. Hopefully that helps point you all in the right direction and know what to do. We did have open office hours the last couple weeks via Google Meet. The first week we had 3 folks. It was really good discussion. We talked about the class, we talked about the labs, we talked about, answered some questions about those things. We also talked about careers in information security, career advice, that kind of thing. Only had one person this second time this last week. Covered a lot of the same kind of topics. If the time isn't good, we were doing it on Thursday nights, so I'm gonna announce and plan to do that on Tuesday this week. I can do Tuesday and Thursday if it's helpful. But I just need some feedback from you on what time, if there's a better time that would work. I've been trying to put it toward the end of the evening, so folks who are further out, or end of the evening for me anyway, like this week it was at 9 o'clock my time, 9 to 10. But figured that would be better for people who are further west and where it's a little earlier there. So if there's a time that would work better for folks and you want to be able to participate in those, I think it's very helpful. It's not required, but it's a good opportunity for you to ask questions and get answers in real time. And I can screen share and show you things from the lab or whatever would be helpful. All right, so if there's any further questions about the labs and those kind of things, feel free to ask me. Email is the fastest, the easiest way to get a hold of me. But the discussion forums work too, or the instant messaging sort of feature, the messaging feature in the classroom. Any of those is fine. So the week 3 discussions, I want to go through and talk about the 4 discussion questions there were in week 3, give some feedback on stuff we saw and some good things, some things that were kind of left out in those discussions. The first question was about key management and incident report, right? Discuss the roles and responsibilities, or key personnel in incident response. Discuss the roles and responsibilities of key personnel when handling and responding to an incident. The first one that comes to my mind, honestly, is the lawyers. I mentioned it before, but it bears repeating. I mean, the lawyers really drive the incident response train because first worry any company has, any organization has, is legal liability in a situation like this. And the lawyers drive the bus. And we make all kinds of recommendations as professionals. Generally, our recommendations end up getting implemented. But I mean, just this week, the client was asking for us to do some certain things to help them out in handling the incident. We said, yeah, we can go ahead and do that. And we got a note from the lawyer saying, hold off, don't do that. The lawyer wasn't confident that it was a good idea from a legal perspective to do that. And so now we're kind of on hold waiting until Monday to figure out what we're going to do about that. But the lawyers really drive the train in incident response. The next category is probably the first one that people mentioned and the most obvious, which is your information security people, right? In a large organization, information security and IT are fairly distinct roles. In a smaller organization, they tend to have a lot of overlap. But the InfoSec guys are usually going to have any internal incident handling capabilities are going to be in your InfoSec organization, your information security organization. And the guys who do that sort of thing, as well as managing your firewalls and other security devices, those guys are going to have a lot of log data that you need. They're also going to be the ones implementing any recommendations you make for improvement or remediation or mitigation, anything for containment. So those guys are constantly, those are your main points of contact in the company. Are usually, as an outside consultant, in my role, that your main point of contact is usually in InfoSec. Sometimes your main point of contact may be in IT, so IT would be the third category. Like I said, in large organizations, those are kind of two different things. Obviously, they work closely together, but the IT folks are going to have, in an organization that's big and has separate InfoSec and IT people, the IT people still have a key role to play because you're constantly asking questions. As an outside consultant, especially, we have no idea what we're getting into. We're going into a situation where we don't know the company. We don't know what this. So when we say, oh, hey, it looks like the attacker got onto this server. Well, what is that server? What does it do? It looks like the attacker breached this particular username and was using this username. Well, what does that username do? Who is that username? How might they have gotten those credentials? What would those credentials give them access to? That sort of thing. We constantly need to work with IT. Other ones you might not think of internally would be things like HR. HR has a significant role to play often, especially if it is or might be some sort of insider threat. We call it insider threat, basically, where you've got a person who's a trusted insider who's doing something wrong and abusing their access to the system in some way. We definitely see that from time to time. Often what happens also is, the majority of the incidents we deal with are some attacker on the other side of the world right? Some foreign intelligence service, some criminal organization in the Ukraine or something that has hacked into this organization's systems. That's the typical thing that we deal with. But usually what they're doing, the most common method of attack, is they're spear phishing, sending some kind of email, some kind of malicious email attachment, getting someone to click on a link. And what happens is that this piece of malware will take over the computer or not necessarily take over, but will run on the computer belonging to a user. And since that user unintentionally ran that piece of malware, that malware can do anything that user can do. And it's using that user's identity and access in the system to do what it's doing. So it's often very hard when you look at the logs of what happened, it's hard to distinguish between what that user is actually doing and what the threat actor is doing using that user's identity. So often HR gets involved because sometimes there are suspicions that maybe this person, maybe it wasn't an outside attack. Maybe this person really is in on the attack somehow. Maybe they're some kind of insider threat. And so protecting their rights in an investigation like that is a role for HR, and that you've got to get HR involved, and legal will insist that you do. So lawyers, again, to the rescue. Your PR or your communications organization, right? Most organizations will have some kind of public relations or customer relations or investor relations. All of those things can come into play. If a big publicly traded company gets hacked, their investors are going to want to know what happened. The general public might want to know what happened. Their customers, their suppliers, all kind of people want to know, well, what happened? Is our data at risk that these people might have? And so working together with the lawyers to make sure that what they say is okay from a legal perspective to say, the communications and PR people get involved in that. And then senior management or your board of directors is going to be involved, right? Usually they're not directly involved, but often the senior IT or InfoSec people are having to brief the CEO or the board of directors. Occasionally, as outside consultants, we'll brief those people ourselves, but usually we're briefing like the CIO or the CISO, and that person is briefing the CEO and the board and so on. But those people have a key role to play. They have a key responsibility. Ultimately, they have the overall responsibility for the health of the organization, and they need to know what's going on. So those are key personnel in incident response. The next one was about attacks, and there was an article from that was talking about the new NIST incident handling guide and the 3 different ways of thinking of an attack. And they're saying, well, which one is the most important? Like my answer to most of these kind of things, it's kind of like, well, it depends. So one of them was looking at the attack by the method of the attack, right? What happened in the attack and what needs to be fixed. That's the most important in the immediate handling of the event, right? You've got an ongoing incident. You need to look at, well, what's going on, right? What is the attacker doing and how can we stop it, right? That's the first consideration. The second way of thinking about an attack was about the impact on the system, right? How long were systems down? What type of information was stolen? What kind of resources do we need to recover from the incident? So recovery happens after containment, right? The first thing you need to do is stop the bleeding, right? We've got an active adversary. There's hackers. They're running around. They're moving, controlling different systems in our network. They're moving data out. We need to cut off their access and get rid of the attacker from the network. And that's once you've done that, then you can turn and start to realize, okay, so what was impacted? What information was stolen? You can look at that a little bit while you're trying to do that containment exercise, but it's largely a distraction. If you've got enough different people, you can be kind of multitasking, but that shifts and becomes the most important way to look at the incident once you've finished containment. You got to figure out what was impacted, what systems were taken offline so we can recover them to their normal functionality, recover things from backup if they were destroyed, ransomware and other types of attacks that cut off access to your information or delete your information are very common these days. And then the third way of looking at it was sharing information and coordination methods to help your team and others handle major incidents. And that really corresponds to the final phase of the incident response process, which is going to be like your after action review and lessons learned, right? And that's super important, and you don't want to skip it. If there's any of these, I would say is not as important. It's that it's important. You definitely want to do it, but it definitely doesn't come until later also. So really, I would think those ways of looking at attack, they're all important, but they correspond to kind of the phases and the process of handling things as you go through it. The next one is RAM versus volatile data. This one may have been a little confusing. I thought it could have been worded better. I would like for it to be worded better. They say, which one would be better to conduct incident response if you can only choose one, either imaging RAM or just collecting volatile data? Part of the problem is they don't really define what they mean by volatile data. Technically, the RAM on a host is a type of volatile data, right? We've looked at volatility, and that's why volatility is called that, is because volatility is for looking at volatile information, like specifically RAM on the computer. But what they mean here, I think, by volatile data is a smaller subset of data. We refer to this in the business a lot of times as like forensic triage data. So forensic triage data, often there's a lot of different tools out there that you can run on a host that will grab key things out of memory and off of disk, key bits of forensic data, like key log files. It'll make lists of all the files and all the directories along with their size, and maybe hashing of those files. So you can see file hashes of maybe the whole disk, maybe just certain parts of disk. It'll grab portions of the registry, and different key indicators and key bits of forensic data off of the host. That's what I think they mean here by volatile data, as opposed to grabbing the entirety of RAM. Because that volatile data usually will amount to a couple hundred megs or less on most systems. That type of triage data, whereas RAM is going to go on to 8 or 16 gigs, however much RAM you have on the host, which can be a huge amount on some servers. I mean, I've dealt with some where you've got like 128 gigs of RAM on a server, and it's just an insane amount. It's very difficult. It can be done, but capturing that amount of RAM is not easy. So if you had to just choose one, it's tough because RAM is more data, and more data is always better, but RAM is only one type of data, whereas triage data is going to give you stuff from on disk and from that you can only get from memory and logs, and it's going to get stuff from lots of different places. Here's what we generally do. We use a tool that grabs that kind of triage data, and we get the client to run it on every machine in their network as much as possible. And all that data then gets sent back to a central server where we put it all together, and we can search across all their machines for across that volatile data on all their machines. And that's, we do that, and a lot of firms like ours do a similar type of process. So I would say if you had to choose one, volatile data is the way to go. It's good to preserve the RAM if you can. If we have a particular system of high interest where we really think that likely that this system was breached, the attacker was definitely on this system, then we strongly want the client to capture RAM and a forensic image of the disk, like the kind of things we're analyzing in this class from those hosts. But the thing is, you can't capture those kind of assets from every one of thousands of machines when you go into an organization. It's got thousands or tens of thousands of computers. But you can do that with this smaller amount of key forensic triage data. So by getting that from everything, then you can search across the entire enterprise for data of interest in your incident. All right, last one. Expenses. When an incident occurs, it incurs expenses. So incidents are expensive. Getting breached is not a good thing. It gets expensive. Discuss at least 3 expenses associated with handling and responding to an incident, and describe the impact. In talking about expenses, I'll say that for last. Okay, so the first one is like your immediate direct expenses. If you have direct damage or costs that are outlaid that are directly because of the incident, right? If you have to buy supplies, buy an additional server, if you've got stuff that's in like a virtualized environment, you got to add disk. A lot of times you got to go out and buy supplies and get things you need to deal with the incident. Some organizations end up, sad as it is, paying a ransom. If they've got a ransomware infection, it still happens. We kind of discourage clients from doing that, but sometimes they really just don't have a choice. It's like kiss all your data goodbye or pay this ransom. And unfortunately, it ends up being a pretty easy decision for companies to make. It's like, the company. So like I was saying, ransom, sometimes it has to get paid, and there's just nothing much you can do about that. So those are like direct expenses because of the incident. The other is recovery and internal IR work. You're gonna pay a lot of overtime sometimes to people internally, or it'll impact. There's two different ways that it costs a company to have their IT people and InfoSec people all dealing with an incident. One is sometimes to actually pay out outlays of direct money, bonuses, overtime and stuff to people for working all this extra time. The other is, you may have to pull them off of projects they're working on, so it may set back other work that you need to get done because you're dealing with this incident. Either way, there's a cost to the company in that. The third type is your sort of extra outside help in terms of consulting, paying for someone like me, my team to come in and help out. It ain't cheap. I'll just tell you that much. It ain't cheap. And paying for lawyers. Most places hire outside lawyers. Even a law firm that gets breached hires an outside law firm to advise them on their breach rather than handling it internally in most cases. So generally speaking, the lawyers are going to get involved, and they have bills too, just like us. So one piece to mention about this is insurance. I think a couple people mentioned insurance in their things. There is such a thing as cyber insurance. It's pretty common these days, and we see insurance claims in about half of the incidents we deal with. It's pretty common for us to see those these days. And the insurance can be helpful, and it does pay. It does pay for the stuff that needs to get done. It pays for us. It pays for our consultants, generally speaking, to come in. We actually have special negotiated rates that are a little lower for the insurance companies because the insurance companies send us work, right? The person calls their lawyer. The lawyer helps them call the insurance company. They go to file an insurance claim. The insurance company says, well, you need to get somebody in to some consultants to help you figure out exactly what happened. And here's some you can choose from. Sometimes they even require to use specifically consultants that are approved. And so sometimes we have some, a lot of firms usually have pre-negotiated rates, just like a body shop would have a deal with your car insurance company. So insurance, it really plays a big role in there. A lot of questions come around about whether insurance is worth the money, whether it's worthwhile. And that's a tough question because it does pay, but insurance is always, you'll know this if you've ever had to file a substantial homeowner's claim. They end up increasing your rates. Overall, the insurance company has to make more money from companies paying premiums than they pay out in claims. So the more claims start coming in, guess what? The rates start going up. Insurance is always going to be one of those things that overall, you probably will end up paying more into than you get out of it. But if you have a major problem, just like if you get in a major car accident, you're glad you have that insurance and you need it. So a lot of companies just view it as more prudent rather than taking the risk of a huge loss that they have to finance on their own to have cyber insurance. So hopefully that's helpful. I don't know how many of y'all are listening to these whole things, but hopefully this is good information and useful to hear from sort of. I'm trying to give like an inside view of what we really see and what we really do, what really happens in this business and in this area of responding to cyber attacks, cyber incidents. So I'm gonna go, and y'all have a good week, and I'll talk to you soon.